Okay, so today I'll continue my Absolutist philosophy series, and basically what happens with it is that actually, one thing I wanted to do, which I kind of introduced the format earlier, is like try to react to certain stuff, like either movies or stuff too, like kind of as an aside in between just these Absolutist philosophy episodes. But the problem with that is it puts you in a position where, you know, you basically, I just have to charge my stupid Bluetooth headphone. I keep forgetting. But yeah, let me think here what specifically I wanted to discuss here today. I don't really go in with a plan all the time. But let's see. One of the core concepts of my whole debate format is like this. The idea that like the difference between the symptom and the disease, or like the coping with contrivance, is kind of like social contrivance seems like a positive in terms of like being nice or whatever, social reinforcement. But what if that social reinforcement is in service of the subversive state? So like, it would have been nice to be nice to other people and positive in Germany in World War II, but then in the process of doing that, you're reinforcing it. Like, it's similar to how like psychology works. Psychology, in the way it's applied, like therapy and medicine and stuff, is a weaponized way. It's very fascinating, and I've discussed this in the past. It's a weaponized way to reinforce the particular era that you're in. So it's kind of like, if you went to a therapist in World War II Germany, and like you see the signs, but like, oh, you're crazy, you're paranoid, or something, it's like, wait a second, maybe there's something actually wrong that I should be worried about, and I shouldn't be happy, and I should be risking my life to stop something or do, whatever. So like, at what point does that ever enter into it? So if you were to do the same thing today, like, okay, what about this, I feel like, go to a therapist, like, my tax money, if I was old enough at that time, went to the Iraq War, and I still feel guilty about the babies that were killed in Iraq and civilians and stuff. And it's like, is that a legitimate thing? Oh, but just reinforce it, or just be a mindless sheep and just go along with it. Like, that's so, I want that as like a framing. I'll do it as like a social experiment. What would a therapist say to that? Like, oh, and like all these labels and conditions, right, are the same thing. We have a label for everything, like, oh, autistic or ADHD or OCD or whatever, right? Every idiosyncrasy is weaponized as a label to try to discredit people and define them. It's like, wait a second. What about the fact that, okay, were cavemen autistic? Were cavemen ADHD? Were they OCD? Like, what does that mean in a realistic sense, not in a reinforcing sense? Like, if you don't behave in the way that modern society wants you to, yes, you'll be one of those labels, but right, there's no such real thing. Is it real, or is it just reactive, basically? Because if it's reactive, then every era will have its own method of the same thing. Like, if in the Middle Ages, if you didn't behave in the way that society wanted you to, you would be called a witch or something like that, right? So that's the modern witch hunt, is like, oh, we got to label everybody who doesn't conform to the exact uniform way that society assumes and says that you have to behave, right? Which is not held accountable. Like, why do we say we have to behave that way? Is it, what if you're content not doing that? What if you don't need to? What if you prefer something else, right? Like, that can't possibly exist. But what happens is basically that it's assumed that that's what everybody has to do, and then it's assumed that that's what everybody has to do, and then if you don't do it, you're labeled something, which is interesting because, again, you'd have to kind of qualify those things. Like, so again, we're cavemen that way. Like, you'll label a caveman, oh, this autism existed with cavemen, and it existed in other times in history. Like, it's like a error of convenience. Like, oh, well, we're so comfortable now, we try to we invent things, right? You get to a level of complacency in society, like where we have the luxury to label things and invent them. It's like it doesn't really exist. There's no such thing really, because right, language for things to do with social contrivance, especially language doesn't exist, right? So like people when they're born in nature, they don't speak. They might have some basic form of communication, make noises and stuff, but language is not an inherent thing. So how could it be an inherent natural thing? Like, oh, a human being has this condition that affects their ability to socialize, but wait a second, they had to first learn a language which is not inherent or natural. Then they had to first be exposed to indoctrination in society and have certain social expectations of that particular era, that particular country, that particular, lot of qualifiers. And only then, now you're labeled as though it's an absolute or an inherent, even though we just laid out the prerequisites that wait. So under that condition, it's arbitrary, because so it's not a real inherent condition that a person has. It's actually just, again, a weaponized way to reinforce the norms of an era that are often just arbitrary. They're not really based on anything, right? And they're sort of reactive to technology. They're reactive to a lot of things like that, which, again, doesn't even necessarily mean they're bad, but when you try to force it on people, that's really what it means, right? It's when you try to force in their mind, in their actions. There's nothing that says we all are like robots and behave exactly the same way, right? That's what society tries to make us. And if you don't conform to that, then we're going to label you. So it's kind of odd. But so one of the other things I would discuss on this topic is one more thing on just the labeling is kind of like it doesn't even serve a purpose, because just to try to discredit, really, like, this person isn't doing what we want them to do, so we're going to label them. But what if they're, again, it's a forced, compulsory kind of thing. What if they're doing exactly what they want? Or what if they don't care? Or what if, it's an implied incentive, right? Hey, how's it going? Oh, nothing much, just late night driving. Not even really that late, but this, again, a compulsory state, it assumes a couple things, right? It assumes their intention. It assumes their, what they want, what they value. So again, you're trying to force something. It's like the emperor has no clothes fallacy, or I call it false duality. You assume this is the one thing and one thing only that everybody must do and everybody must want, right? A certain way of life or priorities, incentive, life goals. And then if you don't do it, it's not that they can simply prefer something else or they don't want it. It's that, they lack the ability to do it, and therefore they must be labeled and attacked and stuff like that. Which sort of shows you the insecurity of the contrivance state in that way too. Like, it's not enough just, if what you're doing is what you want, and if you're at peace with it, then just do it. Right? But that's not enough, because you're not at peace with it, because it's contrived. Right? It's artificial, like posing a false absolute to specify the stimuli acme is one example. But, so you're not at peace with it, so you have to outwardly insist. So anything you see that doesn't conform to that, you have to condemn. Otherwise, you might think to yourself, wait a second, maybe I want to do that too. Maybe, it'll break your false absolute that kind of you're structured into. So what happens with that is, again, marriage or something like that. You're married and society pressures you to be with one person, stuff like that, but you see an open relationship. This is always kind of an amusing thing to witness. Open relationships would have to be condemned, like, they never work, right, is the fallacy. Well, wait a second, marriage doesn't work. 50% plus of marriages end in divorce. Regular relationships don't work, monogamous, so what kind of criteria is that? It was more just the insecurity of you not being at peace with your own state, so you have to attack something else, right? Whereas somebody who's in an open relationship doesn't have to do anything, right? They don't have to attack monogamous relationships. They're doing their thing. They could be fine with you doing yours. So there's a difference. It's the same thing with minimalism. Like, for example, the minimalists living out in the woods or doing something very basic insist they have to, I don't know. I had this short story where I wrote like a scene that I always visualize in my head when on this topic is like, there's this fisherman who's like a native to an area, right? And he's fishing, he likes to be alone, even, again, amongst his own people. He's kind of like a recluse, right? and he survives all the war. He's like this figure of solitude and like consistency. Where I say the quote, like, artifice doesn't last. Like, everybody else comes and goes. They pick sides. They have their incentives. They pack up when things get tough. Whatever. He's just always there. He's always by himself, out of everybody's way. He's just fishing, right? So the point is that he outlasts everybody, even though you might be dismissive or whatever, because everybody else had something to gain, something to lose. He just doesn't care, right? But the point is that once that land is conquered, they spare him, sort of, or ignore him because he's so low profile and he didn't fight anybody. So he's fishing. But now what happens? There's this scene that I wrote in this short story. It's a very weird one, but basically the essence of it was this fisherman character. Then some of the conquerors, have taken over now. They've killed his people, and he still doesn't care, right? He didn't care about anything the whole story. His own people, he's annoyed. They're complaining, oh, the invaders are coming. He doesn't care. He just wants to fish. Then the invaders kill his people, take over the land. He still doesn't care. He just wants to fish. He just wants to be alone. He's just at peace, right? The whole time he's at peace. And then what happens, right? The lands are taken over, and then, whoa, the fuck? I got way too close. The thing is that what was he not at peace with, or it takes the reversal. Now those invaders are swimming in that water in front of him, right? And some of them are women, and some of them are like scantily clothed, and now they complain or feel insecure, like, oh, he's staring at us, oh, he's a pervert, he's looking at us, right? So think about that scenario. You didn't care when they invaded and killed your people. You didn't care all the encroachment and everything that happened, but now they come in your line of sight, in your water that you were fishing in, right, all this time. And now, oh, you're the one taking this outward action. But that's a good way to show the minimalist. Like, they never wanted anything. They never bothered anybody. But now the invader comes back and says, oh, you're staring at us. You're bothering us. Right? Like, they're entitled to that. So that just shows you that's like the final straw. Is like, it's sort of a trick towards the end of the story. Like, you think, oh, this guy's going to survive everything and be at peace. Right, he just never cared about anything. He never bothered anybody. But they still find a way, despite all that tolerance, despite all that, indifference, they still find a way that, oh, now look, we're going to project and say something, and we're going to, you're looking at us. Even though we came in your field of vision, we came in your country, we came in your water, we came in your, society. You're looking at us, and oh, you're making us uncomfortable. So the implication is kind of, it ends off sort of like that like they're still gonna, even then, they're still gonna bother him. They're still gonna find an excuse to do that. So that's kind of how the Emperor has no close fallacy works. Like, it's not enough for people to be sure of what they're doing and do it themselves, right? Again, you can do whatever you want, but that's not how society works. There's a pressure and there's an incentive to force other people to do that too, right? You have to, like, kind of contrarian fallacy, or defined by reaction, or defined by non, I call it, where you'll be defined by not doing something, right, that's considered compulsory, that, like, if you're just neutral, like, no, it's outward to be neutral because it's supposed to be considered common or normal to do this outward thing, right? So again, there's a false absolute, false default, outward thing. Sometimes, I guess religion is a good example, but it's not quite the same in the modern day. But like, you're called an atheist, but wait a second, or a non-believer, but that's not an outward thing, right? We're all born atheists. So with religion, it's like, are you outwardly religious, and which specific outward religion are you, versus, oh, you're defined by not being religious. Like, that's not an outward position, right? And then the same thing is true of, the same thing is true of, again, like the contrivance state. You'd be defined by not doing something instead of actually by doing it, or you would feel kind of compelled to, trying to think of how to describe that same point, like the pressurized thing. It's not enough for people to apparently do something that they're sure of and that's absolute and the one-size-fits-all way of life. It's not enough for them to simply do it. They have to outwardly insist they're never at peace with it. They have to distract themselves, follow favoritism, escapism. They have to constantly reinforce their social contrivance, etc. But even all that's still not enough. Then they have to attack or ridicule or frame or outwardly insist upon everybody else or anything else that exists. Like, oh, this person couldn't possibly be happy in an open relationship. But again, they have to attack that, because if they didn't attack that, or if they saw that, oh, look, they are actually happy in an open relationship, they're not telling me to be in one, they're just minding their own business, but just simply observing that they're happy in one would then make you feel foolish, like, well, maybe I want that too, but I just can't handle it, or I just don't have the opportunity to do it, or I've been indoctrinated and brainwashed by society to try to be in a marriage and monogamous and stuff like that, because it's easier for society to control. But that's the thing, is like, you're coping with your own form of control that you've experienced, but you have to kind of trick yourself to believe it's absolute, etc. And what that means is, now you have to constantly, so that's why, like, the human perspective and opinion and views and everything you think and believe, and even things you enjoy or think are positive or gratifying, it's all impure in the sense that it's biased and preconceived, especially in a contrivance state. Like, you're not just observing the world around you, right, for the truth and the objectivity of it. You're doing it in a selective way to kind of reinforce what exact state you're already in, or what state you're kind of indoctrinated into and exposed to. So it's like, when you look at that, like an open relationship, you're not just simply looking at it objectively, you're trying to frame it in a certain way to make you at peace with your own state. Right, so there's a certain impurity and incentive there with that, right? Like, you'd feel very biased. A lot of other things are true too. So you observe a minimalist at peace and doing what they're doing is like, oh, they couldn't possibly be at peace, or they couldn't possibly be what they want. They must just lack the ability to do what you're doing. They must want that, but they just lack the ability or resources to do it. Because if they were at peace, then again, it makes you question, not so much that you would do that specific thing, but just that you could do something other than what you're doing. Right? So again, it's this false duality state, like, nothing else can exist, nobody else can prefer anything. And, it means that you're trying to make your form of doing something seem absolute, because you're already, it's the basic trick of cognitive dissonance of, like, people don't want to admit that they're wrong, or in this case, not even so much wrong, but like, if you're already doing something, it must be right, because you don't want to question yourself, right, or have cognitive dissonance. So whatever you're doing must be right because you're doing it, because you can't possibly be wrong. Or again, it must be absolute, exclusive to everything else. The problem with that is the way that you get people to do something then is you indoctrinate them, get them while they're young, indoctrinate them while they're young, and then kind of force and pressure and structure them to do something for a long period of time. So then when they're finally old enough to think for themselves, now they're already doing something, or they've done it so long that now they don't want to admit they're wrong, or they could have been wrong all that time, or that, so like that's what the absolutists would do, is they wouldn't take ownership of that. I know I call it the self-actualizing from an inherent base state. You kind of negate and neutralize all those things you didn't choose and you were exposed to, and now you can choose things for yourself because you were too young to think for yourself and stuff like that. But yeah, what that basically means is that just the issue is that, how can I explain it? Just non-invasive self, like, so people will insist upon whatever they're already doing, but the reason why they're doing it is because it's something they didn't choose that they're kind of reacting to. So when they're reacting to it, it means that it could be anything as arbitrary as something you didn't choose, something you were exposed to in your youth, but you'll insist upon it because you're already doing it. Right? You don't want to question what you're doing, or you could possibly be wrong, or nothing else could possibly exist, or you could possibly prefer something else. And so that was a good discussion, but what was the other topic? There was one other thing I had mentioned that I wanted to talk about, like the fact that basically non-choice reaction, like it's like the consistency issue, like whether you have a belief system or something like that, it would be like more consistent often to do less, right? There'd be less contradictions. So it's not even that, there's a right or a wrong. It's like, if you have the supposed dogma or belief system, whether it be a religion or something else, now you have all these rules, you have all these supposed standards. If you hold them really accountable, consistently accountable, you'll realize a lot of things in your life probably contradict with it. So the best way to be consistent would then be to just do less, be a minimalist, live in a log cabin, etc. So now the less you do, the more free you'll be, or the more consistent with that you would be. And beyond that, you have some other consideration, like, again, the trick of not wanting to question what you're already doing, but then you should question it because the way in which you ended up doing it wasn't your choice, right? It wasn't through rational consideration, it's through indoctrination in youth that bypasses critical thinking, which we take for granted and treat as an absolute, but it's obviously not. So that's the best way to demonstrate that is through the stigma effect, as I call it. Like, every era of human history thought its way of life was right and doing things was right and whatever, so. Right, so that really doesn't matter because again, it's the trick of like basically forcing somebody into a situation, and then they're in it for so long, or since they're already in it, they won't want to question it or admit that they could be wrong, or again, just not absolute, exclusive to everything else. Okay. What other topics here could I do? I feel like that's good enough for now. Let me talk about something random, like the fact that I'm tired. I don't know. I guess just the fact that a lot of stimuli acme projection, and it kind of looks like that fisherman is a good example. Like, it's just so that image is the whole point, right? That's why I wrote that whole short story, was just because of that one character. It had other things going on, but right, it's just that ridiculous nature that, like, it's almost like a Curb Your Enthusiasm type ending, right? where, oh, the whole story is like he just minds his own business and he wants to be left alone. And whether it's his own people, whether it's the conquerors invading killing his people, no matter what it is. But even when you're minding your own business, you never want anything, you never do anything, you're just doing the same thing all the time, right? By yourself, fishing in the lake, just leave me be, kind of a thing. But they still, at the end, oh, look, he's staring at us as we're swimming in the water and we're all scantily clothed and like you're being all insecure and projecting. He doesn't care about that. He's been fishing his whole life. He's been there the whole time. But it doesn't matter. Now you'll frame it and project it. They're like, oh no, now we're the victims, even though we invaded this place, killed everybody, took over their land, we're bothering him, we're interrupting his fishing, like we're swimming in his water, not his water, but like in the water. That is just a classic kind of moment. Yeah, let me think about some of the other concepts. Again, just that reactionary basis of cognitive dissonance, that you get kind of stuck with one thing because, again, you're already, it's a tough thing for people to do, but it's kind of like how they define their identity when they're an adult, young adult to a full adult. It's kind of like you're defining yourself by all these things you didn't choose, right? It's kind of similar to just the family basis of what's the most valuable or important bond in life. Oh, your family. You mean the family that you didn't choose, that you were born into? Like, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but right, you're insisting upon things you didn't choose. You didn't choose your family, you didn't choose your country that you were born in, necessarily where you live, where you grew up. You didn't choose right, a lot of things. There's one thing, okay, fine, you didn't choose it. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means that it's not absolute exclusive to everything else, or it shouldn't put like a proper, do you cling to it and define yourself by it, or do you see it for what it objectively is? Like, oh, it just is, it just exists. Like, it's nothing special, it's no big deal. Or this is one funny thing, as you see these highway signs, I had this joke, like, an exit is cooked when the food and the gas signs are both the same. Oh, what does this exit have for food? The 2 gas stations. And what does it have for gas? The 2 gas, like, it's the same thing. Like, there's no actual restaurants or fast food or anything. Like, when you're in really some of these dingy towns, that happens, right? So it'll say, oh, Sunoco is for food because they have pizza there and stuff. Like, yeah, we get it, but is that really the best thing that you would put on a highway sign? And then this Burn Dairy, people might not know what it is, but it's just a local gas station that obviously they make milk and stuff, but their pizza is actually pretty good too. But the point is that should not be the things that are on the billboard for food for an exit, because that's just kind of sad. Or like, again, the nearness postulate, like I was talking about, just so again, you define yourself and value by things that you didn't choose in the first place. So it's one thing, again, there's like 3 layers. It's one thing to be exposed to those things that you didn't choose, right? That's not your fault. Obviously, you're too young to think for yourself. You can't do anything. But it's another thing to insist upon it, or to act like that's ultimately what you want or what you choose, right? What you desire, what you define yourself by. And then it's another thing to either reject it or just be neutral and then see it for what it is and then choose for yourself what you actually value. And so some of the things that happen here are like, it's what I call the self-actualizing from an inherent base state, where you kind of neutralize that a little bit. And what else was there? Like, just, you define your identity by stuff like that you didn't choose. And so what it means is that right, you define yourself by all those things you experience, and now you get to a point in life where, like, now you're like act like you're sure of everything, or like you define yourself at that point. So you define yourself in like a fixed way that like that's how you are, and that's it, and there's no freedom or self-actualization or human variable or anything like that, right? It's all just, again, like a one-size-fits-all fallacy. And so I guess I could just do that sometimes. Like, even if I'm not talking, I could just like, okay, I'm just driving, and like IRL stuff kind of blurs the line a little bit. People do streams when they're asleep. It's like, what is it that we're really supposed to be watching? Or, just I don't know why I'm even going so slow. Okay, I think that's good. I'm getting kind of tired.